farm moment, a teachable moment in practices for land tenure. Because we're all watching this case from direct landholders, shareholders, to other major land trust conservancies across the country, and the broader young farmer community, so that it's not just the people sitting in this room. This precedent means something. In Europe, there exists a highly organized and confrontational youth movement, Reclaim the Fields, which engages in many educational and advocacy efforts and also specializes in direct action to prevent land seizures. Last week in Colombia, farmers finally ended a national 21-day strike against federal control of the seed supply, where they shut down 40 major roads across the country. In the USA, we lack this formal network of landless youth and strong rural organizations who can articulate the connection between land access and food sovereignty. Protest remains an honorable and appropriate tool, but to be clear here, what I'm calling for here is accountability. That the organizations in question come to the table, find a workable solution, and a decent alternative for this project, its farmers, and community. I am convinced that our long-term food sovereignty will require increasingly frequent acts of public solidarity so that the big players can correct their path. As young farmers, we know that we are pointed towards a more regional, more diverse, healthy, and locally owned food system. We are pointed and we are getting there, and we know that land rights, land access, and secure land tenure is a prerequisite to our success. Just want to say an aside here that the New Paltz community is experiencing what happens when we are experiencing CSAs in our region who are struggling. And I think it's important to take this moment and realize that as a community, that this is what can happen to our CSAs, and if we don't care for them throughout their entire process of life, these kind of things happen. Large-scale landowners must understand that they will be held accountable in the public eye if they begin to act inappropriately, no matter how embarrassing that might seem at first. The public, for whose benefit and whose behest these public trusts and philanthropies work, must stand with farmers in this. They are public trust organizations. Their philanthropic status is derived from their service to the larger public. We are all stakeholders as we are all eaters. This isn't a matter of farmer versus landowner, and farmers cannot stand alone. This concerns every citizen. Philanthropies and NGOs who are entering into the beginning farmer business, and many of them are, there's lots of money going into young farmer training that is not necessarily representative of the young farmers, need to heed very clearly from the Yeoman spirit of this new farmer movement to recruit serious, committed, thoughtful agrarians to work the lands that they own. We'll have to be confident of fair treatment, due process, community involvement in decision making. I personally have experienced a lot of big organizations go into the farmer training business, the farmer renting land to young farmers business, and the conditions between and the agreements between those very large nonprofit organizations with access to the land and the leases with the farmers are not in the best interests of the farmers. And if you really want to support the best interests of the farmers, you do need to craft that lease in such a way so that the investment that young farmer, and not all the young farmers are young, there are also many ages, that needs to be crafted in such a way that they are rewarded and they benefit from the improvements they put onto that land. And many of those leases are very short. 1 year, 5 year, and you can't establish businesses in that environment. To recruit, we are not here to be deployed. Our self-determination on surrounding lands is compromised if major players don't play fair. Democracy isn't a promise, it takes practice. I am a greenhorn, green beginner studying the political, cultural, and economic context for land access in the 21st century in preparation for a symposium on this topic in 2014. So Severn's already creating this natural conversation about this, about the larger issue, about this specific one. With fresh eyes from Ben Franklin, Henry George, Tolstoy, Wes Jackson, I can see it's time to raise a voice. We all must get involved, call a spade, and start with useful conversation to ensure that those with power do not abuse it. And I also, let me just see, there's one up here. And I think that if anyone here knows, actually, if someone could creep into the room, if anyone, Guy Jones spoke about the anti-rent of wars.
Yeah.
If we have a historian in the room or someone who's particularly aware of the anti-rent wars,
Right here.
could we call upon that historian to share some history?
That's actually not my field of expertise.
Stand up.
If nobody is comfortable to talk about it, and I wish Dirk was here, it's because I think he can. I think that it is important for us to look back at that history because this has happened before, and there are really solid examples, and maybe we can have a history lesson one day, maybe our next meeting, about the history. Thank you.
My name is Miriam Strauss, and I would just love more information about what are the relationships between Doris Duke Foundation and Glenwood and OSI. Are these corporate shells? Are they wide overlapping boards of directors? What's the deal on this? And I also want to say, because somebody had mentioned, as an aside, somebody had mentioned something about, is there a plan for the Gatehouse to have destination weddings? When this first came up, I went to the Glenwood website. In my past knowledge of the Glenwood, I only had positive thoughts about them from what little I knew. And they're big on destination weddings down at some of their places down in Westchester, and it's all very, very upscale and white glove. But but they had a section on, they had one of their drop downs was about sustainable farming and local farmer empowerment and so forth. But it was one of those, you go to a stub and it's like, you know, come back, get a life, come back someday. So I thought that was appropriate. They did not respond to my contact.
Larry? Paul. I think Paul can respond to her question.
Yeah, I have partial information. I can't say I have a complete answer to your question about who's what. I've tried to look into that very question. I'm a pretty good researcher. My name is Paul Bermans. I'm a retired physician. I want to let you in on a secret. Work is overrated. The attempt I made to figure out specifically was the relationship between Glenwood and OSI. And what I was able to establish is that both were born out of money from the Lila Wallace Atchison Foundation. I think that's the correct name. Yeah? The money that was passed down from the founders of Reader's Digest, a conservative bastion. But in any case, they both were born out of that in talking to people in and around both institutions. I was one of the people who went to that meeting with Glenwood in the Woods a few weeks ago. It was very interesting. Don't get me started. I'm going to finish quickly. But the impression that I have is that both institutions, it's not clear that there's a line between them. Whether they're the same thing, whether there's some kind of tax deals going on. I mean, I'm a firm believer that we live in a society of illusions. And I think that we may be seeing some of these. I think that one of the illusions I am concerned we may be dealing with here that we need to be careful about is I think that there's been a tremendous public relations campaign about the wonderfulness of OSI and Glenwood. And I think that from the direct experience that several people spoke to here tonight, besides Creek, I think that those wonderful stories about these institutions have to be at least taken with a grain of salt. I'll say no more on that at this point, but I think that the idea that we have these wonderful institutions because that's what all the newspapers say is something I would caution us all about. But the relationship specifically between those two organizations, I've been able to arrive at no more definite conclusion than that. They both came from the same money. They both talk of themselves as if they were a singular we. It's a we that is almost an I. And I'm not sure exactly what to make of that, but that's the experience I had talking to people who are connected to these institutions in one way or another. So what exactly they are, I'm not sure. And the Doris Duke Foundation, I went to Duke University many years ago, and they give a lot of money to a lot of things. They're a very wealthy organization out of cigarettes. Duke family money is from cigarettes and energy.
One of the connections is Judith LaBelle, who's the founder of Glenwood. She's an attorney. She actually worked for a law firm named Burl, Cass & Case in New York City, and Open Space Institute was their client. So
Also, Bob Annenberg, who's the Vice President of Open Space Institute and General Counsel for Open Space Institute, the guy that's driving this farm situation, was a board member of Mohawk Preserve. And before that, he was a ranger at the Mohawk Preserve. And he acts as agent for Mohawk Preserve on many occasions to this day.
Yeah, by agent, my name is Eric Francis. I'm a journalist. I've been covering OSI since '97. And so Annenberg is really the common thread here between Mohawk, Glenwood, and OSI, and Friends of the Schwangungs, and the Schwangung Conservancy. And they do a thing that, really, they do a lot of corporate shell games, and man once sat in Hoagland's office with a piece of paper in front of my face, Glenn Hoagland, executive director, and said, what you're saying is that there's this piece of paper between you and all this stuff that's happening, but it's not really you because there's this piece of paper, and it's like peekaboo, you know? And that's basically what a corporation is, especially when it's all the same people involved in the corporation.
Thank you very much.
And you know, at mohawk.org, there's this article on the land acquisition tactics of Bob Annenberg, mohawk.org. It's not Mohawk Preserve's website. They left that one out in the rain, and I got it for $8. So mohawk.org is where I'm collecting my articles on the preserve and Annenberg and friends of the Schwangungs and all those friends.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is Johanna Hogan. I just moved into White Oaks Lane, which is right off of Gatehouse Road, a month ago. Just a month ago, I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 4-month-old at home that I need to get home to. But we saw on the Mohawk website, there's an entire, I don't know, 40-page article about the gatehouse, and there's Plan A and Plan B for the parking lots. I walked in thinking that this would be talking about whether it's going to be Plan A or Plan B, and now there's all this other stuff going on. A lot of what?
We want Plan 0
right.
for
Well,
the parking
there are
lot.
a lot of emotions and everything, but I'm a little bit surprised that it seems like there's a lot of different stuff going on. I don't really know where I fit into this meeting. I wish I did. I wish that there was more information. Like I'm surprised nobody mentioned, when it was talking about this, alleged parking lot. I'm reading about 200 spaces on the website. It looks like 20. So there's a lot of misinformation. I don't know if it's misinformation from the website. I don't know if it's misinformation in here because
Did you clarify that you said the website says 20 and you heard 200 here?
Yes. Yes. So there's definitely like a little bit of honing in that needs to happen as to what really is going on, and I really think there needs to be space for people like me to get what we would like as well, and kind of join forces in that way. I know I have a lot of friends with little kids in this area that would be very upset if there were a 200 parking space lot put in. I personally don't want the entrance between A and B, that it's between the entrance off of Gatehouse with an extra stop sign, this weird thing, or right off of 299. I would be upset if it turned into a place with vendors. I know there's electricity there. There could be vendors. If it's 200 spots, then obviously they're going to have vendors and food and God knows what else. So there's a whole community that could join into this if there were a space for them.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to say that before I go home to nurse my 4-month-old.
I just wanted to, I'm going to interrupt you because when I was standing before, I wanted to say something about that. Now, I've been in and out of here since 1958. The idea that they would even disrupt that land aesthetically around the gatehouse is so repulsive to me. Yes. It's a site, and I believe that everyone who lives in those communities, which are, and I'm a broker, they're all upscale homes, would want to get together and stop anything that is going to make that place ugly. It's a beautiful road driving up to the mountain.
Well, that's what I thought.
I'm big on aesthetics, so
Yeah, well,
aesthetics are actually part of cultural definition of landscape, and they're part of preservation.
My name is Andy Weiss. Loud enough to be right over there. Before this lady goes home, is there a Facebook page where she can get this information or something? If everybody,
Information coalition has to do is get all information.
what's the name of the coalition?
We haven't decided yet. We just got together.
No, is there any real contact?
Come on, my turn, please. My name is Andy Weiss-Bartzak. I live in Gardner facing the ridge. And I'm not involved. I'm not connected to Brook Farm. I went there once with a SUNY group from SUNY, New Paltz. But when I heard that Glenwood, I had a vague idea of, wanted to set up an incubator to help people become good farmers. But they were going to shut down Brook Farm. I thought, nah. And nobody has answered that logic yet as to what is going on. Now, I did a number of phone calls to the town of New Paltz and went there to town hall. And so let me give you the basic of what they told me. The property was owned by the Smiley Brothers, Inc. I don't know what the connection is to Mountain House. It was sold to Open Space Conservancy. They are the owners of record of 856.3 acres, okay? Nothing to do with the preserve legally yet. It is not under conservation easement, but somehow it has a conservation easement, I keep forgetting the word.
Tax exemption.
Exemption. So that they're only paying taxes on the buildings that are on this 856.3. Essentially, they are being forgiven 3/4 of their taxes to the county, town general, town highway, town fire, and school taxes. So they're only paying about 1/4 of the taxes that I guess the Smiley Brothers Inc. was paying before. So tomorrow I'm going to talk to the assessor and try to find out how can you get a conservation easement exemption when you don't have a conservation easement. So, but it's Alice in Wonderland, it is what it is. So that's what it is. The official owner is the Open Space Conservancy at the present time. It was subdivided, it was a 2-tract subdivision when it was bought from Smiley Brothers. 1 tract, I think, the preserve has now, and it's going to be kept undeveloped. And what's left is 856.3 acres. This is rumors about, and there are rumors about that the preserve wants the gatehouse area and blah, blah, blah. But we don't know. That's the whole thing. We don't know. Nobody is talking with us, and nobody's put it on paper, so we don't know what's going to go on. But that's the record at the town hall. That parcel is in the town of New Paltz. There's some of it in Gardner, there's some of the preserve is in town of Rochester, and some of it is in the town of Marbletown. So Rosendale also. Oh, Rosendale also. Yes. Okay, another neighboring town. So I guess we need to investigate what all is going on. But until we get them to sit down, we don't know what they're going to do. They haven't told us. Could be anything. Okay.
No, I just need to. Oh, well, I thought you were going to have to talk. You want to say something, or you have some...
I'm all ears tonight.
I'm sort of I would like to be all ears for a minute, but I just have a question that I think some of you might answer. My name's Susan DeMart. I live in New Paltz. I'm an independent journalist, and I have more questions than answers, and I think this is excellent that everybody's coming through. I'm a member of the preserve, you know, a dues-paying member every year, and I walk all over the place up on the ridge and everything. And I've talked to Creek and Lisa and so on. How many members are there actually? Now we talk about the board of Mohawk Preserve and so on, but how many what's the actual membership of Mohawk Preserve? Does anybody know?
Approximately 12,000.
12,000. Okay. My question is, do most of the people that I did, you know, this is just throwing this into the stew here. Do most of those 12,000 members of the preserve know what the preserve is doing with all this? Because that's another constituency. You know, like I'm a dues-paying member, and I have an interest in the Brook Farm succeeding. I don't have an interest in what sounds like a sort of agribusiness, you know, innovative farm coming in compared to Brook Farm. So I just also wondered about the membership as opposed to the board of Mohawk Preserve. I'm just throwing that into the mix here.
I don't know. Yes, you have an answer?
I don't know. I'm Jeff Logan. I've lived in New Paltz. Many of you know me probably. I've been in New Paltz. My children are 5th generation. My interest in gardening goes back. Those of you that know New Paltz Gardens for Nutrition, my dad actually founded that. He founded that out of growing up with a Victory garden. Those of you that are old enough here remember a Victory garden. So I've always grown up with gardening and getting our produce out of the back. I've been a member of CSA. I support a CSA that I live across the street from. I don't know how many of you know Pete Talaferro. Lived across his farm. We actually bought our house prior to Pete even owning the land. So I've always supported that. I'm not speaking, I'm speaking as a citizen here, not as anything else. I do just want to make it kind of clear, though, some mentions were made of the taxes. I do want to make it clear that the OSI, the assessment actually went up with the transfer of the land. I also want to make it clear here that everything that's been spoken about here has been spoken about in public meetings. The reason I know that is I was at them. They've been spoken at town board meetings. White Oaks Lane you live on, I actually grew up when that didn't exist, and the first house on that was one of my best friends, so I've been playing in that area for probably about 30 years. The whole plan for the gatehouse, it's available on the Mohawk Preserve website. You're welcome to go to it. They are not completely set on their plans. I do want to let everyone know that OSI is going to be paying, actually, we're actually have increased our taxable amount we're getting. We're going to be getting $30,000 a year in taxes, and that includes town, the county, and the school. If anyone wants to go to the assessor to check it, you can go there tomorrow morning and speak to Lori. She will give you the numbers. It's 856. Betty, I don't want to answer specific questions. If you want to go on specific questions, go see the assessor on that. Smiley Brothers will, because of the way the land was subdivided, there was some new assessments on their land. They'll be giving us about an extra, not extra, but they'll be paying about $40,000, $50,000 a year in taxes. I'd have to go and look at exactly. I didn't have time to do it today. So we're getting about $80,000 a year in taxes on those lands. That's actually more than we were getting a few years ago. So to say that it's not being taxable, it is taxable land. The meeting opened tonight, I thought, in a very positive, upbeat manner. I'm disappointed some of the discourse is being aimed directly at some people here. I don't think we should be doing that. I think we should be looking at trying to, what are the solutions here? I hear some beautiful things about, I run by that farm frequently. There's a group of us that run up Lenape Lane and run up into Mohawk Land and go up to the tower pretty much every Sunday. I have joined them, I'm a runner myself. Yeah. Is there a possibility OSI also owns Billy Brooks Farm? Creek, have you, I'm sorry Creek's not here, but has Creek been in open discussions with OSI to take over Billy's Bridge Farm? I know they're in search.
You could take it over.
How do they move the soil?
It's a mess. Billy's Bridge is a mess.
I'm just here trying to help us find solutions. I didn't say that was a solution. And again, getting in public discourse that is attacking what is trying to solve an issue here is not the way to solve this either. If you look at OSI history, they have had about a 20-25 year history of going from about Rosendale all the way down to Orange County. There's about a 50-mile tract of land, which is a beautiful ridge, which I have enjoyed in many different forms, everywhere from hiking, running, biking, and climbing.